So Elon Musk reportedly donated $5.7 billion, or nearly 2.4% of his fortune, the largest in the world, to charity. Hooray, right? Let's talk about it in today's video. So I've long been on the record believing that the very wealthy need to pay more in taxes. In fact, I was quite disappointed as we went through the various negotiations on the Build Back Better bill to see Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin essentially shoot down different types of proposals that would require the very wealthy to pay some more. I mean, after all, they got the tax break of a lifetime thanks to Donald Trump, while everybody else didn't even get crumbs. I mean, in fact, the middle class ultimately will end up paying more than they did prior to the supposed Trump tax cut. So much for caring about average people. But it's become clear that what establishment Republicans care about are basically two things. Number one, appointing ideological judges, and number two, reducing taxes on the wealthy. Now, I have long been puzzled by the Democrats' wariness of really raising these issues more prominently. I mean, for years I've been saying that Democrats needed to be more concerned about the Supreme Court. And yet, here we are. I would hear fellow Democrats complain about the fact that they couldn't vote for a Democratic candidate for president or for U.S. Senate because they weren't excited by him or her. But that didn't stand in the way of Republicans voting for the Republican candidates so that they could take over the U.S. Supreme Court. And now we see what's happening as a result of that. I'm hopeful that Democrats finally have essentially had the fire lighted underneath them that will motivate them to get out and vote purely based upon the fact that we need to gain some control back of the courts. But that is definitely an issue that could potentially motivate our base, if our base would really wake up for that, which I'm hoping we finally have. On the other hand, one thing that's clear is that the general public, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or independent, favors increasing taxes on the wealthy, especially if it means that we'll be able to reduce taxes on the middle class. After all, everybody can feel the fact that the middle class has suffered over the past few years, receiving a far smaller portion of our country's wealth that we've generated over the past 4 decades than the very wealthy have. And that inequality in the United States now surpasses what we had back in the Gilded Age of the 1890s. And in fact, Republicans have even given us an opening to make this issue even more prominent. U.S. Senator Rick Scott, who's heading up the Republican Senate Campaign Committee, has raised the prospect of raising taxes on everybody except for the very wealthy, arguing that the wealthy are paying more than their fair share, which somehow doesn't seem logical, but you need this special logic that the Republicans have. I mean, according to a report from ProPublica, America's 25 top billionaires paid just 3.4% of their expanded wealth on federal income taxes. I got to tell you, that's less than I paid. And probably less than most of you have paid. I mean, Warren Buffett famously pointed out that his secretary was paying a higher percentage of her income in taxes than he was. And this is at a time where Americans have been suffering overall as a result of the pandemic and the subsequent inflation, while at the same time, the very wealthy have seen their wealth explode. It's about time they paid their fair share. How do they get away with this? Well, the problem is that the United States has a system based upon income taxes. So you and I, likely, we get most of our pay from our job. When I get a paycheck from the university where I work, they withhold some taxes that then get paid to the federal government and the state government. And a certain percentage of my income, based upon how much income I get, goes to help fund the government's programs. The problem is that most of these big executives, the incredibly wealthy, take almost nothing in income. Their wealth is based upon what they'd refer to as paper money, the value of their stock holdings in either their company or a series of companies. For example, when Hertz placed a big order for Tesla vehicles, the value of Tesla's stock jumped by about $1 trillion, increasing Elon Musk's wealth up to $288.6 billion. Now, the very wealthy will say, well, that's just paper money at this point. But that's missing then what they do next. The way the wealthy get around paying taxes is that then they'll borrow against their stocks. Banks are willing to lend them money secured by these stocks, the way that, say, our mortgage is secured by our house or our car loan is secured by a car, because of the fact that it's easy for them to access these stocks if it turns out that the very wealthy person defaults on their payments. So essentially, the very wealthy person has all this wealth accumulated in stock. They borrow from the banks usually at a very low interest rate, and then usually they pay nothing, if anything, back. Why do the banks sit by for that? Well, because they're waiting for the person to die. When the person dies, the banks can then collect all the money that they're owed plus interest, which can be pretty substantial at that point. But obviously, the very wealthy person doesn't care, and by then they've paid no taxes and lived a very, very comfortable life and are still able to leave billions of dollars to their heirs as a result of the Republican successful attack on inheritance taxes, or the death tax as they call it. And that's essentially what Elon Musk has been doing, along with Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of that crowd. But for Elon Musk, that's not enough. When I started this video, I pointed out that Elon Musk donated $5.7 billion to charity, right? Isn't that great? The problem is the devil's in the details. It turns out that none of that money has actually gone to any charities. He simply put those funds into a fund that he said ultimately will go to charities someday. There's nothing stopping him from removing those funds from that account. And yet, despite that, he gets a tax advantage for making a contribution to charity. Hooray! If Elon Musk plays his cards right, we'll be giving him money. And all the while, no charity's actually getting anything. Well, this latest maneuver by Elon Musk only speaks to the need for a wealth tax here in the United States. And once again, we can thank President Biden for coming to the table with what's really a very good proposal. His latest budget proposal includes a minimum tax for billionaires and the very wealthy, where any household that's worth more than $100 million, which I got to tell you excludes me and probably most of you out there, will have to pay a rate of 20%, not just on their income, but on any unrealized gains in the value of their stocks. That's where the very wealthy have seen their wealth increase exponentially. Kind of how the stocks have increased and increased and increased. If we're able to tax some of that, there are estimates that tax could generate as much as $200 to $250 billion. That's real money, even for the federal government. I'm hopeful that Congress will finally see the light and pass something like this. It's too long that these parasites on society have gotten away, while the rest of us have really been footing the bill. If Joe Manchin is serious about trying to address the budget deficit, here's one place he can start. Because after all, the huge increase that we have in the budget deficit over the past few years has come primarily as a result of, guess this, the Trump tax cuts, which benefited the very wealthy. So it makes sense that this is the place that we should go to try to address some of that. Now, I can already hear the complaining. Elon Musk earlier this year had argued against a billionaire tax, saying that eventually they run out of other people's money and then they come for you. The problem with Musk's argument, though, is they're already coming for us. We're already paying our taxes. He's the one who we're coming for now. Because guess what? The middle class are tapped out. It's time that the very wealthy pay their fair share. And fortunately, in making the argument for a wealth tax, the best argument we have at this point is the behavior of people like Elon Musk. Well, why don't you check out this other video that I made where I talk about the importance of a wealth tax here in the United States. And again, Elon Musk is one of the poster children for its need. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.